Good evening, everyone, friends, family, well-wishers, haters, ill-wishers. It is Wednesday. It is a day of the week. I'm Duane Whitmer, so it's time for another weekly Whitmer Wednesday. Here we go. This week's going to be a fun topic, one that I actually have quite a bit of knowledge about, and that is going to be talking about something that's crucial in New York State, which is the legalization of cannabis. It came to New York State a few years ago, and how in typical progressive big government fashion, New York State has absolutely botched the legalization of cannabis because big government is just shitty at what it does. You will hear my dog Razzle barking in the background throughout. She's a nut. I can't stop it. She's my backup dancer, my backup singer. I don't know what to tell you. So let's get started on this weekly Whitmer Wednesday. To start, I will start my timer. I'll keep these shorter on 15 minutes because no one really gives a shit when you talk more than 15 minutes. So, to begin, New York State realizes after decades of the failed war on drugs is that the single biggest winner of the war on drugs is the drugs. Drugs won the war on drugs. So they say, well, we should consider legalizing marijuana because, drugs has won. We look stupid. It's happening anyways. How can we, New York State politicians and political class, appease the people who now want drugs legalized? How do we appease them? Well, also keep the jobs program surrounding the war on drugs in check, while also keeping our donors at Big Pharma in check. Big Pharma loves donating to politicians. We saw during COVID why. So how do we keep our Big Pharma donors in check while keeping our jobs program in check? Well, now finally realizing that drugs won the war on drugs, and drugs won the war on drugs. We should probably appease the voters because they're voting for us, and the general rule of thumb says people are more apathetic towards the war on drugs. How do we do this? And their answer was fucking terribly. Like, simple as that. They botched it. New York State just destroyed it all because what they decided to do was they said, a bunch of politicians sat down and said, hey, how do we, the political class, benefit ourselves the best? So in typical government fashion, they created another government agency to hire NOPEs. By the way, I'm coining a new term, NOEPS, NOPEs, not otherwise employable personnel. That is what 96% of government employees are, NOPEs, not otherwise employable personnel. Another thing that government does in form of welfare is another thing the government does very well is they take people who can't succeed in the real world, can't start a business, can't sell a product, probably would starve to death because they're not smart enough to eat and walk at the same time, and they give them a job. It's like glorified welfare. It's serve a shitty purpose while you pretend to work for the government. Like, we're all doing a great job. Look at us go. Hooray. And so that's kind of what builds up most government jobs. These just trudging along, just miserable, middle-aged fools who are just too stupid to do anything other than collect a government paycheck. And you can't fire them. I have more about this when I talk about my dealings with the IRS and the otherwise employables down at the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance. More on that later. So you have these NOPEs, and they're trudging along, and so they say, well, let's find a bunch of just stupid people who can't do a job, can't sell a product, can't start a business, can't do anything. Let's get these people involved and let's get them a job. So they hire them. The government makes a new bureaucracy called the Office of Cannabis Management because the government is awesome at managing everything they do. They've managed your tax dollars well. They managed COVID well. Erie County managed the storm response well. They've definitely kept you safe. There's never been a racially induced mass shooting in Buffalo because of gun control. They manage your protection very well. They manage the foreign soil wars that we do very well. The government has never poorly done anything, right? So they say, hey, let's make a new bureaucratic bullshit agency called the Office of Cannabis Management and pay a ton of people a lot of money to really do nothing. Office of Cannabis Management happens. They work there and they come up with a plan on how to legalize cannabis and how they're going to do this. And then COVID hits, and in typical government fashion, they all shut down and nothing happens during COVID. But you passed legalization. So you passed legalization, but there's no strategy to put it in place. But now it's legalized, but it's not. So now there's this massive gray area. And the market doing what the free market has done forever just embarrasses the government. And people realize that there are gray areas and ways around legalization where you don't actually sell marijuana. You gift it a sticker, you give out a gift, you give out X, and you gift marijuana, which is now completely legal because the morons that write the laws. I'm convinced that the New York State legislators have a combined IQ of like 212, and there's like 150 of them. So do the math. I'm pretty sure that like a brain dead person could write better laws. So great, right? All these sticker stores pop up, all these shops pop up, Indian territories blow up with people selling cannabis, and the state says, oh shit, what do now? Like the market blew up, what do now? We don't know what to do. So instead of saying, hey, we screwed up again, like, you know, we just look foolish and stupid, we should just consider it a loss, cut the department, cut the agency, full on legalization, and then just not suck, right? No, instead what they do is real fast. I'm going to actually, Greg Soika says sex trade is next, Hochul approved. Greg, that's already legal because the government fucks me every day. So now back to my OCM stance is they took the L. They're embarrassed. The market's succeeding. The Senecas in Western New York are, you know, on the territories, your stores popping up everywhere. Hell, there's gas stations on the res. You buy 10 gallon, you know, buy $10 worth of gas, you get a blunt. Everyone's going there. They're loving it. They're having fun. It's a great time. So now what does the OCM do? Oh shit, we dropped the ball. And so we have the war on drugs, and we can't end the war on drugs. We have all these jobs given out in law enforcement enforcing the war on drugs. And we can't just let them go because we have to stick to our political jobs program with the nopes I mentioned. So we can't let these nopes lose their job, because if these nopes lose their job, what are they going to do except probably starve to death? So, you know, we have all these dilemmas. What are we going to do? This is a problem. So they expand the war on drugs. So they said the war on drugs has failed. Drugs has won the war on drugs. We're going to end the war on drugs by legalizing cannabis. But in order to legalize cannabis, we now need to expand the war on drugs and go after all these illegal Wild West sticker stores that are selling without a license. And meanwhile, we're going to put up a licensing requirement. But since all of our not otherwise employable personnel jobs program government agents didn't come up with a strategy of legalization and all sat home with their thumb in their ass during COVID, still collected a paycheck though. We have no strategy in place. We have no plan in place. We're embarrassed. We're scrambling. The legal head of the OCM just quits one day and says, this is bullshit. I'm out. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm out. He quits. There's no one in charge of OCM. There's no head lawyer. They're putting pressure on the localities to crack down on these stores. Some places like Cheektowaga love doing it because Brian Gould, who ran for sheriff, Brian Gould is a pussy and uses it to expand the war on drugs so he can use it to raise his budget so he can pretend he's doing something while not focusing on the actual crime problem in Cheektowaga, because Brian Gould is an absolute fool. And, ran for Democrat sheriff, lost to a prog lefty, rightfully so. Brian Gould, I hope someone shows it to Brian Gould. Brian Gould is one of the dumbest people I've ever met. And the fact that he's high up in a legal enforcement agency shows that, like, maybe we shouldn't have police. Because if Brian Gould can move up in your department as, like, the floor and ceiling are, like, 3 inches apart. Brian Gould is a massive, massive dump of shit. And I've told him this before, full disclosure, so he knows it. But You got Brian Gould, who can't focus on any of the crime going on in Cheektowaga, focusing on trying to bust sticker stores while his employees are in there buying weed. So it's great. It's like this riot of a time. And Cheektowaga is trying to crack down on these sticker stores because, God forbid, no one's opening up a business in Cheektowaga, right? Cheektowaga people are fleeing from Cheektowaga, New York. They get a 68% tax assessment raising. Their schools are struggling. And yet you got them focusing on, God forbid a business wants to come to your shithole of a town, Cheektowaga. Like, I don't know what to tell you, right? So it's just this colossal cluster of like local governments trying to force it out and, other governments trying to force it in. But really no one knows what's going on. And you have the DA in Erie County, John Flynn, who's at a loss. He's like, I don't know. It's technically legal. I'm not going after it. I got a re-election to win. And Erie County is a blue county. I can't touch it. So you got Cheektowaga trying to mess around with it. Meanwhile, 2 towns over, nothing's going on. And, this legalization is a great example of the defiance agenda because a bunch of people decided that they don't give a shit what the state thinks. They're going to open weed stores and sell weed, and the state has no way to enforce closing them. The state has no way to enforce anything else. So now they come out with this fair and equitable minority-based licensing program, which really means that New York State is going to allow, affirmative action companies to run businesses as a way to show how, hey, New York State supports minorities, ignoring the fact that New York State just used government force to take $500 million from the impoverished Senecas to give to the billionaire Pagulas in the NFL. Ignore that. We're going to let a handful of minorities open up businesses. So please take our table scraps. The progressives of New York are very woke and we're very not racist. Please don't understand that, we support gun control that's based on historical, really racist laws. And don't forget that we love, other laws that are systemically racist. We're going to throw you some table scraps and a couple minorities can, we'll allow a couple minorities to open up a weed store and then, we're all good. Well, the problem is it's illegal. And so other agencies have sued to not allow this to happen, and rightfully so. To be honest, it should be the free market, not the state giving out licenses to a select few. But let's talk. Oh yeah, this is a good one. Don't forget the thousands of minorities that they jailed for that same weed. Yes, we've imprisoned tens of thousands of people for a possession of a plant, but we'll let 30 of you guys own a weed store. We're good. Racism is over. That's great. So you have, these generally not otherwise employable personnel running these government agencies. And the best part about it is if you track Jim Ostrowski's working, because Jim Ostrowski's a lawyer, mentor of mine, good friend. He's the second smartest and second coolest libertarian in the state after yours truly. Him and I are working on a project to see who's getting these licenses. And I'll tell you what, remember earlier in the beginning, I said that New York State has to play the game of, the jobs program, the voters, the minorities, and big pharma. A lot of these licenses can be tracked to big pharma run companies. So big pharma's hedging its bets. They're selling you codeine, knowing full well that codeine leads to the war on drugs, and big pharma leads to the addiction issues, as evidenced by Johnson & Johnson, or SC Johnson, one of the Johnson companies, getting a massive lawsuit for their role in the opioid crisis. So they're hedging their bets by, giving you codeine if you want it, or selling you weed if you want it. So yeah, in New York State, the government has failed in legalizing marijuana, just massively. And the free market and defiance agenda unintentionally won. I don't think a lot of these people knew that they were pushing the defiance agenda. They didn't openly, know it was part of the defiance agenda. But one of the things it is not listening to the licensing, not listening to the state-run programs telling you what you can and can't do. And all of these people just said, we're doing it. Greg Swick makes a good point. The government told us that marijuana is a gateway drug. I remember when I was a kid, there was a PSA about marijuana, and it was like super weird. And it kind of give me flashbacks to this PSA of like a guy smoking weed, then his mom cries. Does anyone else remember that? Yeah, the government used to run anti-drug ads. Now the government wants to be in charge of who can sell drugs. That's typical government. I mean, I remember the government used to have remember the food pyramid where like you wanted to base your thing on like starches and carbohydrates. Yeah, that's not that's the government for you, right? You know, don't eat eggs. They lead to heart problems, and now eating eggs is good. Look, the government generally sucks at what it does, and that's what I'm here to tell you. And I'm hoping that more people wake up to realizing that the government sucks at what it does. So we're approaching the 15-minute mark. I'm going to end it here with a summary. And the summary is, when it comes to legalization of cannabis, the New York State government hired not otherwise employable personnel called NOPEs. Those NOPEs are given jobs. It's glorified welfare. They can't function in society. They can't start a business. They can't run a business. They can't hire people. They can't sell a product. They have no skill other than like barely existing. So the government gives them a government job and then puts them in agencies like the DMV, Greg Soika mentioned the Board of Elections. They put them places where like they can kind of just shuffle around and exist and kind of like every so often grunt out like half a sentence. Most of them technically, I guess, go to deal with the New York State Department of Finance and Taxation. That's where a lot of these people go. And they shuffle around at this shitty job that they're miserable at and really just kind of muck everything up, right? And that's what New York State did with legalization of cannabis. They created their own bureaucracy called Office of Cannabis Management and hired a bunch of idiots that don't know what they're doing to come up with a strategy. COVID hit, and no one did anything because no one did anything during COVID. And they got paid a lot of money to do nothing. And now the free market has realized the gray area in legalization leads to wonderful opportunities. And I'm all for it. And I think we should continue to encourage people to stick to the defiance agenda of not giving a shit what the state thinks. And I'll close on the fact that Cheektowaga Chief of Police Brian Gould is a pussy. That's it. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you guys all have a great day. Hope you guys enjoy this weather. Apparently it's supposed to get crappy on Friday, so that kind of stinks. But thanks, guys, for tuning in. I'll see you next week. I don't know what next week's topic's going to be. We'll figure that out. But you guys take care. Have a good one. And enjoy your evening. I'm going to go eat dinner.